For my Year 12 major work I created through my lens. Based on photography and videography, I produced a website, photobook and video vlog that captured my trip to America, showcasing its natural beauty. The first process was capturing the photography and videos. This was done using a Canon camera and mainly wide angle eye level shots with an average ISO of 100 and aperture ranging from 6 to 9. Many locations were visited and the idea of this project is based around landscape. The second process was editing. This was done in Adobe Photoshop and I used the camera raw filter for most of my photos. However, some of these photos were too bright or dark, so I used the tools exposure and contrast to level this imbalance along with the shadow, highlight, black and white tools. This photo was quite dull, so I used the vibrancy and saturation tool to highlight the red, yellows and blues. I then zoomed in and started to reduce noise and color sound. This creates a smooth image by removing the pixels.
Lastly, I color corrected to add more color to the picture.
In the second photo, it was way too bright, so I lowered the exposure and the contrast. I also lowered the highlights, but I increased the shadows to highlight the bridge and the hill, also decreasing the black and the whites. This photo also lacked lots of color, so I highlighted the blue saturation as well as the clarity, reduced the texture, and also reduced the noise and color sound.
I then moved on to color correcting, where I increased the red, blues and greens to highlight the bridge, grass, ocean and sky. I also went back and started to play around with the tools to get the perfect image.
For this third example, I used a normal Adobe application instead of the camera raw filter, as I felt this photo didn't need as much editing as the others, so I only lowered the exposure and increased the contrast.
However, I did use the eraser tool to remove marks and blemishes from an image. In this image, there were a lot of distractions that took away from the overall image, so I decided to remove them. These included orange signs and orange fabrics and the people in the chairlifts. So I went around and I just erased them from the image. This process was hard to use at first, but then it became super easy and only took me around 5 minutes. That was until I got to the shadow in the bottom corner. This was super hard to remove and it did take me 20 minutes. It was a very long process, but it was worth it in the end.
And then this is the final image after it was edited. It looks so much better now that the marks have been removed. And then these are just some other photos I edited, just a handful of them, but all of my photos I edited followed the same tools and techniques. I then moved on to creating my website. I used the Wix website application to create a template for my website. It was super easy to upload all of my photos onto the website, however I did have to compress them all beforehand because they were all too large. The Wix application allows you to edit your photos on site. This was super useful as the quality of some of my images did decrease when transferring onto the application. I was able to higher the exposure and contrast. This application also offers a wide range of transitions from text to image transitions. I use a transition on almost all of my descriptions and images. This adds a professional feature to the website. I was also able to add descriptions to my images. This creates a true travel blog. Next up is my video. This was done in Adobe Premiere Pro. I started by laying my audio and then the first few images and videos. I started to line up the videos and images with the beat of the song. This took a lot of trial and error to get right. I also adjusted my video clips to line up with each other so it would create a smooth transition.
I then started to add my first transitions to my images and videos. These consisted of crossfades and fades to black, as they are the easiest and simplest to use, and they also add a nice touch to the video. I then repeated this process with the next segment where I laid my images and videos and lined them up with the beat. This was again trial and error to get perfectly in time with the first segment.
I then moved on to my next transition, a speed ramping transition. This is a transition between two moving video clips where the speed increases between the transition from the first to the second video. I repeated this transition a total of 3 times across 6 video clips. It's done by selecting markers where you first want the speed to increase on the first video and then a second marker where you want the speed to decrease on the second video. I then smoothed this transition out by adjusting the markers to create a smooth curve at the beginning and end.
I started working on the introduction of my video. This, I just added a video with a crossfade transition on the end. This matched up with the audio as it faded in and out. Again, I'm trying to match the video clips and the transition with the audio. This took a lot of time to perfect.
As I worked on filling in the blanks of my video, I sorted through clips of videos and picked out the best quality and best looking ones that fit in with my work. A lot of these clips needed to be color graded, so in this clip I am trying to color grade to lower the exposure and the contrast because this video was too bright and the colors were very overwhelming. Lastly, I started working on my Photobook. This was done on an Officeworks template. I started by selecting the layout I wanted my images to be in and then selecting the images to go in the layout. Again, I had to compress all my image files because they were too large. This was the last part of my project, and the Officeworks application offered inside editing and adjustment.